Hi everyone, Steve here from eRep. Today we are going to be sitting down with Rob Williams, and we're going to be talking about the profound impact the CVI has had in his professional and personal life. It's a wonderful conversation. Hope you enjoy it.
I'm the president and founder of Breakthrough Strategic Advisors. What I did before Breakthrough is I ran different executive roles as COO and Chief Sales Officer for Sunlight Supply in Vancouver, Washington, a large privately held organization that was a gardening supply distributor. I was aware of others, but really hadn't incorporated it to any depth in my life. No, I mean, I knew of some other ones. Actually, interesting story. In my prior executive career, we had a gentleman come to our office that brought it to my attention for the first time. He was a representative of the CVI, and I was intrigued out of the gate. I got an opportunity to meet the founder of the CVI, and after spending time with him and understanding what went into the development of the CVI and the nature of why it was created, I was incredibly intrigued. And then the verification and validation of the repeatability of this, and learning that it was more than just a personality test, that it was really a core values test measuring your innate nature that doesn't change. I was beyond intrigued, both personally and professionally. Number one, I think, was the heart of how it was developed and why it was developed, and that being the fact that there was a common challenge in organizations, and it is centered around people. And I had experienced firsthand having great people on the team, but not necessarily in their wheelhouse of work, which therefore meant they weren't completely fulfilled or thriving in their jobs. And so knowing that that was one of the reasons that this tool was created, I was intrigued. Then, like I said, the validation that once people were being measured and with repeatable scores, that told me it was more than just a personality test, getting suited up and showing up well, so to speak, whether it be in an interview or at the job. This is just who you were, and you weren't going to change. And I think the third thing that jumped out for me was the fact, and still to this day is a bit startling for me, is through a succession of questions and picking a couple of responses that in 8 to 10 minutes, there is a very deep and detailed outline of who you are. What it validated for me was why I asked so many questions, why I'm looking for answers, why I want to simplify the complex, but importantly, why I want to execute, why I take action. And being an innovator builder, it all makes sense now. And you know, even though my merchant side is a close third, I understand why I'm in the space I'm in more primarily, but also then why my banker, which is my fourth and lowest, made sense to me. I'm not quite so much about order and defined processes. Say my wife, who is a profound banker and worked in the medical world, that is exactly where she needed to be and why she was so successful there. So I've seen it both directions, and then I've seen where in life where I needed to be extremely detailed. And I'll give you an example, two of them actually, and I had to prove it out twice, where my first role out of college was in an accounting. I could do the work. I'm very good with math. I had a degree in finance, but accounting just was not my thing. And it's very principled, very detailed, and there is no gray. It's right between the lines and not a lot of creativity required. There wasn't a lot of simplifying the complex. It was just doing work. And I left that, and just to prove that it wasn't where I wanted to thrive, I took a job again as an accountant, and again, I was able to do the work but never felt fulfilled in the work. And so it was interesting now, after taking the CVI, I was like, that's why I was not fulfilled. I could do it, but I was never going to be, you know, just totally amplified to do that work, let alone improve in it for the balance of my career. You know, obviously I took the CVI personally. did some studying around it, met some people that had used it. I took it and I had my own enlightenment, if you will, around, wow, this is who I am. When I started reading about the positive sides of the CVI, and then also when I'm not in my wheelhouse, what happens and just how accurate it all was. And so how that dovetailed into my family was this. I had a son who was a junior in high school. And I started thinking about back when I was at that age and starting to make some choices about going into my senior year. Maybe am I going to go to college, get a job? How could the CVI have helped me? And it was just one of those moments you don't forget. It's like, wow, I wish I could have done this back then, because it would have saved me some pain. I wouldn't have gone to college and changed my major 3 times. So for my oldest son, I contacted a friend that was an expert in delivering the CVI, and somebody I trusted a great deal, to come in and meet with my oldest son, Logan. And it's hard for me to vocalize how impactful this meeting was. But what I wanted to do was give my son a sense of who he was, not from my vantage point, but from a more scientific vantage point and from a third party who was an expert with this. And so Logan took the test. He came to where I was working at the time in a boardroom, and a friend of mine, Dan Cox, was there. And Dan had never met Logan before. And after the introduction to Logan, I just kind of sat back and let things happen. And I guess what I should preface with this is I wanted Logan to take the test because as he's embarking on his future, if he knew how he was innately wired, perhaps he wouldn't go into a college career or a professional career that was the wrong choice for him. And I knew that by taking this CVI, you can start seeing what work you're really wired for. So that's why we did this. Now, coming back to this boardroom meeting, it was phenomenal because Dan had never met Logan, had never talked to Logan, only knew of Logan through me. And I just sat back and let it develop. And Dan proceeded to tell Logan in very short order who Logan was. And Logan sat there very intently listening and nodding and looking at me and looking at Dan. And finally he just said, "Did you tell him all of this?" And I said, "No, not at all. I didn't." And that was my commitment, is I wouldn't do that. And you know, my son is an innovator banker, and he was described to a T. And the positives and the challenges with his core values and where he would thrive and maybe where he wouldn't. And so the funny story about this is after Logan left, he called his mom and was literally a bit freaked out about how in an 8 to 10 minute test, somebody who never met him could so intensely know Logan deeply. And so that was a pretty profound moment. And, you know, getting into an even a deeper section of this, if I can share this with you, would be this. Being an innovator banker, knowing what I know now about that, I really used to think that my teenage son, who at the time was 16, 17, was just being distant, being maybe a bit aloof at times, being remote, not being in the moment, not paying attention. And it's almost heartbreaking now to tell you this, but he was there. He was there all along, and he was just taking it all in. But he wasn't supremely vocal like people who are wired differently might be. And so all this time that I thought he was just not necessarily in the moment or in the conversation, he was taking things in and processing them very deeply. And I'm just, without the CVI, I would have never experienced that. I to this day would have thought that he was just not interested, that he wasn't there, that he was, you know, remote from the situation, and nothing could be further from the truth. is once you have an understanding of somebody's core values, you understand how to work with them. You understand how to lift them up, and you understand how to optimize situations. And I know in my life I've unfortunately been too critical, maybe been too judgmental. The old adage of judging a book by its cover, I mean, I've been guilty of that. But I've got to tell you, I've been proven wrong once I see somebody's CVI and that I understand how they're innately wired. It helps me in the communication with them, in the delivery, and also in their responses. And so I've used the tool both personally and professionally in my advisory and consulting work. As I mentioned, I'm CEO of Pyramid Heating and Cooling in Portland, and I'm literally just got announced to the team 2 days ago. And we've already started the CVI process with our leadership team. So I'm not wasting any time. And I just smile because I know what's coming, right? And using this in my other consulting work, I've literally had CEOs call me at home and say, you have no idea what you've done today. You gave us a taste of the CVI. People won't stop talking about it. We want more. We now have the basic foundations of how we're wired. Come back and help us learn how to communicate with each other and optimize our teams and right fit and right mix our company. And I've had the pleasure of doing that. So let me give you a great example of this if I can. Somewhat family related, if you will. So I had my oldest son's girlfriend take the test. And I had a pretty good idea how it was going to turn out. And just for fun, I said, Taylor, go take this test and I'll see you in about 10 minutes. And so she did. She came back all excited and said, okay, I'm done. And I said, I haven't seen your test. Don't tell me anything, okay? And I said, first of all, you're a profound merchant. How did you know that? Well, she was. And I said, I'm guessing the next with you is going to be a builder. It is. How did you know? Were you looking? I said, no. You were in the other room and I wasn't watching this. But I've been around it enough to know, and I've been around enough of her and watching her and been exposed to the CVI enough that I had an idea what was coming. But to answer your question now more directly, and what was so cool about this, is she'd never been exposed to this CVI. She'd only heard us talk about it in the family. And so what I did is I then said, Taylor, you've got your results. Just start reading them. And I watched the physiology of her body as she was reading the results of who she was. And it was crystal clear just by watching her mannerisms, the experience, her lighting up when she was reading about the positives of the CVI. And then when she wasn't able to be in her strength of love, what she might do, and she was like, oh yeah, I actually am that person. So to answer your question, I think that you don't need to necessarily have an expert with you to take it to a level that is profound and deep for you personally. It's there, and it's accurate. And I actually asked her this question: how well do you think the results of this 8 to 10 minute test that you just took describe you? And she goes, they're spot on. And I said, yeah, they are. In life, when you're not being your authentic self, maybe when you were trying to prime yourself to be something that you didn't naturally want to be, or maybe what others, it could be parents or your peers are lifting you up to be or encouraging you to be, and you're trying to be that, but it just doesn't feel right. And then you come back to the CVI and you know why. You know why. It's just not your natural wheelhouse. And that doesn't mean you can't improve in those areas, but I had several of those moments. Again, I got a degree in finance and thought I was going to be an accountant, and I was not wired to do that naturally. I could struggle through it, but that was a clear-cut example for me personally where maybe I was more led to believe that that was a good career path, but it isn't where I fit most naturally. This isn't my natural self, and it's going to be very difficult, if not impossible, to rewire myself to be there and be comfortable full-time, where you're just firing on all cylinders. But the other thing I learned through this process, and I think it's just as important, is when not to be an innovator. When no more questions are needed. And I never had even really thought about that, because I'm constantly questioning. I'm constantly looking for answers. And it's funny, I've gone back now in my memory and actually had conversations with my mom. And she said, you know, you were always asking questions, looking for answers, and then you'd go do something. And I'm like, yeah, well, that's because I'm an innovator builder, but I didn't know that when I was 5, 6, 7, 9, 10 years old. I know it now. But the other thing is there's also a time to move on and stop asking questions, because the situation doesn't call for that. There's a time for love. And I've kind of found that being more my sleepy core value, that there is an appropriate time, and it's really most of the time, to use love. And as I've put that into my life, it's amazing what has happened when I've brought that into the situation. So it's not just knowing myself, it's knowing when I'm using values that aren't really needed in the situation, and or being alert enough to say, I need to migrate to a certain situation right now. And it may not be my strength. But the beautiful thing is, when the situation calls for an innovator or calls for a builder, I'm in the front row and I'm ready to go. I've had these situations where I thought I was reading somebody properly. They took the CVI and I was very wrong about who they were. And you know, for whatever their situation led me to believe that because of their quietness or whatever, that maybe they're more of an innovator and or a banker, only to find out literally in one instance this individual was a profound merchant. I had no idea, but once I knew that and it came time to start communicating with him, it was honestly, it was just incredible how the discussion and the relationship changed, and how much more he started opening up. It was again pretty profound. So I misread the situation. The CVI opened it up, and once I treated him in the wheelhouse where he was naturally most comfortable, it just blossomed very quickly. To me, it would be time wasted not to do this. Because people can put on a front, people can put on a facade, they can try and appease another individual based on what they think they need to be. The CVI doesn't allow for that. The CVI will tell you right now who you are. And the thing I love about the CVI is there's no right or wrong. It's just who you are. There's nothing good or bad about being one value or the other. It just, this is how you're wired. And in order for me to have you in the best place in your career or in your personal life, to know that that's how you're wired, but when you're around others that are wired differently, how to have a much different conversation that's healthier and moves things forward, is more uplifting, less combative. And honestly, I would highly recommend it to any business. I would recommend it to families. I would recommend it to men and women that are thinking about getting married, or families, or whatever it would be. I mean, anybody in a relational world, which we all are, why waste time? Go get the CVI done. You know who you are. And then those that are around you, once you know who they are, you're just going to start operating more efficiently. And, you know, in the business world, there's an element of time, right? You're trying to be successful and profitable and efficient. Why waste time? Start with the CVI. Make sure that your people are where they need to be in your organization. Use it as an onboarding tool. Don't waste time. Have interview candidates take that CVI before they even come in to make sure they're wired for the work that needs to be done. And then in relationships, I mean, I go back in time and I think about, what if we did this with students? What if the teachers knew that that classroom of 25 students who are all different, but the teacher knew how each one of them was wired? And so that one teaching skill may not work optimally for all of those individuals, but now you know why. Now you know why. And now you know how to work with these people. What would be happening in our school system? The students would be more engaged. The teachers and the students would be more connected. I'm certain that it would lead to higher graduation rates. I'm certain unequivocally that before kids left high school, that not only would they be better educated, they would be more prepared for what lies next, and would certainly have better relationships not only with their teachers but their peers. Right? I just think it's an opportunity. The CVI in and of itself is an educational opportunity for students. First of all, I understand that. I mean, I think people naturally have some sort of fears. But what I would say, it's the best thing that you can do for yourself, because it's not just about this job, it's about your life, right? And the other thing is if you want to confirm that you're in your wheelhouse where you need to be, we should do this. And also, if you're not in your wheelhouse of where you should be, take the test and let's find out where you can thrive in the organization, right? Because you don't want to have to suffer not being able to do your best or to fight it day in and day out. And it's been proven time and time again that when people in their wheelhouse of core values, they're just going to perform better. And the reason is because it comes natural to them. They don't have to struggle. So, you know, my hope would be, and again, I've actually been in this situation with several people where they had fear about, are they going to be judged? Are there wrong answers? Am I going to lose my job over this? No. If nothing else, it's going to explain exactly what's going on, for better or for worse, and how do we work with this, right? So that's how I would lay it out, and that's how I have laid it out. I am absolutely committed to see the CVI continue to blossom in society, is because I think it gives people peace. I think it gives people understanding. I think it improves communication. I mean, I can't think of any other tool available out there today that is more impactful than the CVI. I mean, it has the ability to impact everybody in every aspect of their life, period. And it doesn't matter if you're a mom, if you're a son, if you're an employee, if you're an athlete, if you're an executive, everybody can benefit from this. I would stake my career and my character and my personal legacy on this. If you don't take the CVI, you're wasting time. You're just wasting time. If you're serious about optimizing your life, your relationships, your performance, your career, take the CVI, understand it, and encourage others to do the same thing. You know, there's an old expression that there's no magic bullet, right? This is one of those. This is one of those rare things that you might see once in your life that can really cause global change quickly. This would be one of those.